most complicated new feature is the ability to import directly from XML. Up until now, the ezEML has been used simply to work on documents that were created within ezEML. And ezEML and the underlying MetaPipe library do not attempt to implement the entire EML standard, because it's quite big, quite extensive, quite complicated, and a lot of stuff that's in there. You know, it's intended to cover every possible use case, but most metadata documents don't need all that. So to keep it easy and simple and manageable, we implement a subset of the EML standard. And up till now, ezEML could always assume that any document that it was looking at was created in ezEML, so it can make assumptions about what's going to be there and what isn't. Now we're going to support importing existing XML files, EML files, that it's an obvious use case that a site has a whole bunch of EML that was created in the past, wasn't created with ezEML, but they're interested in using ezEML to update it, that kind of thing. So they like to be able to import it. But at that point, all bets are off, sort of, as in terms of what sort of content is going to be in there. The structure of the document may well be something that may include things that ezEML doesn't understand. So that complexity has to be handled. So let's look at examples. First, I'm going to import. This is the easy case, and a lot of files will be like this. By the way, I've already done this in setting up, so it tells me you already have a package by this name. Do you want to replace it? And I'll just say yes. Okay, in this particular case, the XML didn't contain anything that ezEML didn't understand. It came in just fine, so we're good to go. When you import an XML file, the XML, the metadata generally contains, especially if it came from our repository, the data tables and other entities have links in them, online distribution links that tell you where the data file actually lives. And using those links, when you import the XML, I'll just do it again real quick. You are given the option to go get the data. And ordinarily, I would suggest you should do that, because that gives you then the ability to do re-uploads. So I'm just going to say get associated data files. It's going out to our PASTA infrastructure underlying the repository, and it's getting the data. If the associated data files collectively are more than 100 megabytes in size, you're given a notice that that's the case, so you can decide whether or not you really want to do it. This one's a little bit large, not quite that large, but now so I've got everything. All the metadata is here for this package, and I've got the data, so I can do re-upload. So if what I'm doing this for is I want to, we have, it's a time series, for example, and we have some new data to add to this data table, I can do re-upload. Okay, so that's the simple case where we did it, we imported, and there was nothing that ezEML didn't understand. Now let me look at a little bit more complicated case. This is a data package from FCE. I'll import it. Yeah, I want to replace it. All right, now in this case, there are EML element types that ezEML doesn't understand. Change date, change history, change scope. These are things that aren't handled by ezEML. They're not exposed anywhere in the user interface, and they're not understood by the underlying library. So we tell you what are the things that we've had to omit because we didn't understand. And then there's also, in this case, a couple things that we do know what bounding coordinates and geographic description mean, but we don't expect them to be under coverage. We expect them to be under geographic coverage. So we've omitted those. You can look at this and decide, well, these things I don't really care about, and these things I can fix. I can go look at the XML and fix it, whatever. However you want to handle it, you can decide whether or not it's usable. To keep, so you don't lose track of what the errors were, we have this copy errors to clipboard, which then you can paste into a document of your choosing. Whoops, where'd it go? To keep track of it, so it's not lost. And again, you can get the associated data files. So that's a case where we had some EML elements we didn't understand. Now there's another kind of complexity that happens where it's easier if I show you an example. There are a number of elements in EML that have a type called text type, which can be quite complicated. So they're abstracts, method step descriptions, intellectual rights, and project abstracts. A few, it's like a half a dozen things that ezEML exposes that can have this more complicated structure. So you can have a section that contains a title and a bunch of paragraphs, and the section can contain other sections, and the paragraphs can contain itemized lists, ordered lists, markdown, and so on. It gets very complicated, potentially. So I'll show you how we handle that. And so this is a reminder that explains all that, and it's also in the user guide, but let me just show you an example that'll be easier. So if I go, in this case, looking at the abstract, let me just say, ordinarily, when you're looking at something where you fill in text, it's in this usual font, and there's no XML tags or anything. It's just nice and simple. And if you're working in ezEML, creating a document purely within ezEML, that's all you'll ever see. This other complexity only happens when you've imported something from XML and it has these more complicated text types in it. So in this case, it does have that more complicated kind of text. So for example, in the abstract, this is what we see. We switch to a different font, partly to make it just visually obvious that this is one of those text elements that has to be handled differently. And partly because in some cases, this is a monospace font. And if you had markdown or literal layout elements in here, the spacing actually matters. So that's another motivation for using a monospace font. But the main thing is it just makes it visually obvious. And you'll see that within the element, we have the XML tags represented. To XML tags, I'm assuming most of you have familiarity with XML. The tags begin and end with the less than and greater than sign. But the text itself may also contain less than or greater than sign. So that to distinguish, for our purposes, to distinguish between those cases, we use an escape character, the sort of standard escape / to say this less than sign is part of a tag, this greater than sign is part of a tag, and so on. So now in here we have an emphasis, which is basically italics, and that has a tag, etc. So basically, when you look at this, what you're going to be editing is XML. If you don't, it may well be that all you want to do is sort of correct some of the text. So you might say, the present data set, whoops, my caps, there we go. The present data set contains, so I don't, if I'm just changing some text, I don't really have to worry about the tags. The tags are there. But let's say I do modify the XML structure some. I may introduce errors, and how do I know when I've done that? Because this is a little bit abstract. Well, besides the font changing, there are in these text elements, there are these check mark buttons next to it, which check the XML validity of the item in question. So in this case, it's valid XML. It tells me, but let's say I introduce an error. I'll corrupt that tag there, and I hit check the XML, and it tells me the opening and ending tags are mismatched. It's para X and para, they don't match. Okay, and if I fix it, and then do check again, and now it's happy. And if I didn't fix it and I tried to go on, it would tell me, no, you got a problem. So let me fix it. And I go on. In this case, intellectual rights has that text complexity, and has the check XML validity button next to it, method step, descriptions, the same, and so on. One thing I want to say is that when a XML file is imported, we look and see, does it have some of this complicated text stuff in it? If it does, if any of the text elements of that type are in the file, then all of the relevant ones are treated that way. It's sort of an all or nothing deal. So the abstract here had emphasis tags in it, so that made it a complicated case. And the method steps are really not complicated. It's just a paragraph, but they're all treated the same for a given document. One other thing to note is when you save this back out, the XML won't look exactly like what you imported. The white space will be different. Whether tags are on this, opening and closing tags are on the same line or on separate lines, that may well be different, because the ezEML isn't carrying along the XML representation. What it's working with is this more abstract representation that's created by the MetaPipe library, and it's only at the point where you export it as XML that it's generating XML from that. It's sort of a new representation of the XML. So it may look different, but semantically it will be equivalent. I think that covers it. Now now one other thing about importing XML is that where do you get the XML from? And then you could go up to our data portal. If it's, for example, if it's a package that's in our repository, you go up to the data portal and get it. But we make it a one-step thing for you by having this fetch a package from EDI. If I go get a package, just pick one at random. And let me back up for a second. This is a similar setup to what we have on the data portal, where we have all the different scopes, the different LTER sites and the EDI scope, and you pick the one you're interested in, and then within it are all the packages. You don't have to know what the current revision number is. You just pick the package. So if I want EDI 16, it went and got it. It was imported without errors. I could get the associated data files. And once they import, then I've got the package, and I'm good to go. And then I can edit it within ezEML.